All right, so hi everybody, welcome, happy Friday. This is the second panel session of our Career Connect session. I am Nicole Marconi, I'm the Access Services Manager here at the Hoboken Public Library. I have two amazing special guests with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
I'm Devin Brain. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of the acting company and a freelance director in New York.
Hi, my name is Gregg Mozgala. I'm an actor, I'm an artistic director, and an arts administrator. I'm a director of inclusion at currently at Queens Theater in Flushing Corona Park in Queens, New York.
Amazing, thank you both. So I'm just going to kick things off, and if people have questions, feel free to raise your hand or interrupt as we're going. But my first question is, so can both of you talk a little bit about how you got into theater in the first place and how you sort of, let that maybe guide you through like where you went to college and how you sort of went through that. So whoever wants to go first.
Oh, cool, I'll go. So yeah, I mean, my family was a large athletic family, and I really liked sports. I enjoyed playing them. But I'm disabled. I was born with cerebral palsy. So at a certain point, that became just ran into some problems and barriers there, particularly around like adolescence. But I first took a speech and drama class in 7th grade, and that was like the hook. That's what like got me involved in like theater, acting, and improv and things like that. And I just sort of picked it up and started pursuing it more seriously there, just taking classes, youth theater groups, whatnot. My family moved to North Carolina the start of my freshman year of high school, and I actually spent my senior year of high school at North Carolina School of the Arts, which was like a conservatory program. It's a college level training program, but they have high school programming. And if you're interested in acting, you can go for your senior year. And part of that, if you want to continue professionally, they set you up you end that year auditioning for programs and schools across the country. So I ended up going to school in Boston at Boston University. So because my parents are from Massachusetts originally, so I had a lot of family there. So I knew growing up going from small town North Carolina, I wanted a big city, but felt I wasn't quite ready for New York yet. So Boston seemed like a good starter city, and I had family there, so it was just like a good fit. And went through 4 years of acting training there, and then moved to New York and have been kind of pursuing it ever since. And just working in whatever ways I can. Started my own company in 2012 with a focus, on telling stories around, the deaf and disabled experience in the 20th and 21st century. That helped lead to my job at Queens Theater, who contacted me because they were interested in becoming more inclusive of those populations. So we're looking at kind of through that lens, like through programming, can people get in the building? Was like one of their questions. Does our programming reflect that experience on stage? And if not, what can we do to help address that or mitigate those issues? So we've been looking at kind of the organization holistically, along with the whole, staff, to see how we can do that. And it's been a really kind of interesting journey along the way. No straight path, no straight line, but it's been great so far. So that's in brief, but that's how I got here. You can go, Devin.
Great. Let's see. How did I get into the theater? I moved around a lot as a child. I lived in 5 cities and 2 continents before I was in high school. And then in high school, we landed in one place for a while, and I'd made a friend who sort of blackmailed me into coming and working on a show. And I found a sort of real joy in the community and the sort of ability to create something as a group. I'd seen a lot of theater with family up until that point, but I hadn't really ever thought about working on it. And it became a sort of regular part of my social life. Then I went to school in Michigan at Kalamazoo College, mostly with the idea of being either a writer or a sculptor. And then as I was there, I kept doing a lot of theater. I started taking more classes in it. I started realizing that exactly how excited I was by it, about working in it, about the different fields that it um, involved. And I started experimenting with different ways to be involved in the theater. I started out doing a lot of design, scenic and lighting design. I started shifting away from that because I didn't care what the molding looked like on the back wall of a set, but I was really interested in the sort of big ideas behind a set. So I started assistant directing for a couple of directors, and then slowly moved in that direction. It was a place that I felt really comfortable and found myself useful to other people. I got out of school having somehow actually gotten a double major in theater and literature. Once I was out of school, I found a job working at a large institution. Then I went a bunch of other places. I built shows in China. I moved to Chicago and started a theater company. Eventually, I went back to school. I went to grad school at Yale for directing. I found myself sort of struggling with my craft. I knew what I wanted to make, but I was having a lot of trouble figuring out how to make it and how to help people see the ideas that I wanted to sort of put on stage. So I went back to school. I spent 3 years in New Haven. And then when I got out, that sort of led directly to a job working for a theater company, the company I work for now. And as time went on, I just kept sort of doing more work, and I got into theater administration as well. So I'm the associate artistic director here, and my job is sort of everything the theater needs in a given moment. I focus on sort of curation. So I do a lot of the season planning. I help commission new work. I help cut scripts for the older texts, but I also oversee marketing departments and hiring on a production level. You know, anything a theater needs, I've probably done it at one point or another. So now it's sort of my job.
Yeah,
Devin,
thank you both.
Devin, did you grow up in a military family?
Everyone asks that. It was actually an academic family.
Oh, okay.
I was born just as my father was in grad school, and then we moved to different universities. I didn't live more than 2 blocks from a college until I was 22.
Gotcha. That's because I was a military brat. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's amazing, Devin. I actually didn't know any of that about you, so that's fun. All this fun stuff to talk about. You both. Thanks. Those were super thorough answers. You both touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could talk about like sort of how your college experience, or like maybe a little about your college admission experience, like shaped your like path into theater, I guess, if that makes sense. Because I feel like when I was me specifically, like applying for undergrad, I didn't think I was going to be doing theater, for like any sort of a remotely job later on, but it ended up happening anyway. So if you can both just like touch on that before we move on to other questions.
Sure. Again, I said this a little bit, but again, I think like I was really coming from at that point like a small southern town. I was really interested in a city, and I had family connections where I was going. Like so, that made a big difference in the decision making to go to college. And I was really so Boston University was a BFA program, a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, and a conservatory program. And so I was really I wasn't sure if I wanted like a small liberal arts school with with a good program, or to really just be concentrated and go to a conservatory. But I think because BU was interested in me and because of the family connections and things like that, it just made good sense. I had to navigate things a little because of my disability and my idiosyncrasies as an actor. I had to navigate things, I think, a little differently. So I was really interested in. I sort of had to figure out how to engage with that and what that would do, and see if there was if the training was even, accessible for me, for lack of a better term. But I think, and in a lot of ways, it wasn't. But I think what that did was it allowed me to uh, get curious and interested in other aspects of theater, like playwriting and directing, and stage, all the things that were like comprehensive of the training. But I really got interested in plays, kind of a diversity of playwrights, and kind of what kind of stories were out there in the world, and what kind of stories weren't out there in the world. So I had a teacher that really got me sort of involved in playwriting. And he was a playwright himself, and ran a theater out on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. So, I started as his kind of, he got me like a work study job as his assistant, and just started reading a lot of plays, and we started talking about play development and all this stuff. And I think that kind of link led directly to, me starting my own company, and, developing plays and getting them produced here in New York, and everywhere else. So you never know where anything is going to lead, right? And one kind of roadblock along the way can actually set you on a path that might um, put you in a really fruitful and productive direction. It may not seem that way at the time, but I mean that really can happen. And I think that's what's a great thing about being in college, and especially undergraduate programs. I mean, that's the time to really be like learning and investigative and curious, and be figuring out kind of what you want to do, right? And really exploring as many aspects as you can. It's a really true learning environment where you can fail and make mistakes without any like real huge repercussions. So I think that was really I just found that, and with some distance from it now, I just found it was a really productive and fruitful time in my life that helped, lay the path for where I am today. So I'm done speaking. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean that's beautiful. I came out of an academic family. My as I said, my father is a professor, so he had really specific ideas about school, and we talked about it a lot. And I was a very, very, very shy child. In high school, I was, did not like talking to people at all. So one of the things I identified when I was starting to look at schools was I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I wanted to look at small liberal arts programs that would offer a sort of wide range of opportunity, that I could take studio art classes and poetry classes where I could sort of explore a wide range of things that and that the school had relationships, was like sort of based on relationships, where I would have real mentorship from professors in a variety of capacities. And I picked Kalamazoo uh, honestly as a joke. I was applying to a number of schools, and my parents said, "You need one more school as a sort of safety." And I picked a school with a funny name. Uh, that also, when I was looking at its actual stats, had a bunch of unique qualities to it that, as I got through the process, I became more and more interested in. It was not just a small liberal arts school, it also gave a lot of control to the students. You could pick what semester you were on in any given year so that you could get internships in the winter at professional organizations, and they worked really hard to get you those. And 90% of the students at the school spent their junior year abroad. And the school basically financed it. So you could go to a wide variety of programs and have experiences that were significantly out of your sort of comfort zone, which meant that I ended up spending a year in London sort of studying theater in particular with artists that I would never have had access to otherwise. And it sort of reshaped my understanding of what I was interested in a way that I still reference events that happened during that year as being pretty seminal to my understanding of what it is that I do.
Amazing. Thank you both. And just for a little background for anybody who's watching or listening, I used to be a stage, for those of you who were here last week, I used to be a stage manager, and Devin and I went to grad school together at the Yale School of Drama, now the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale. And Greg and I did a show together where I was one of the stage managers, and he was one of the actors in the show in 2018 at the Public Theater. The show was called Teenage Dick, for anyone who wants to look that up. It's an amazing show and I loved it. It was still one of my favorites.
Be careful how you Google that show.
Yeah, well, it's like,
it was just so people, it was a modern adaptation of Shakespeare's Richard III set in high school.
Yeah. And it's so good. It's still one of my favorite shows that I've ever done in my theater career. But just for a little background. Thanks guys for those answers. We do have a question. I had a question, direct message to me. So how exactly, this is for Greg specifically, but how exactly does the auditioning process work in theater and television these days? That was a question that was asked, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure, Devin, feel free to chime in as well. I think, we've been in a pandemic. We still might be post pandemic at this point, but I think much of theater since March 2020 had transitioned to virtual. People were getting back into person. I think we're just auditions for theater at least, or just, I don't know if they haven't begun in earnest, like they're just starting to get back to in-person.
This week, the Actors Union released the new rules for in-person auditions.
Mm-hmm. So everything is being done on Zoom, right? I think for theater, film, and television. So, and the term for that is a self. It can either be, you can do a live Zoom audition where you are actually on Zoom with people from the theater or the production company or whoever it may be, or you can do a self-tape, which is you pre-record, and there's a lot of a lot that goes into that. So many actors I know, it's an investment with, you have to shell out some money to come up with, lighting and sound equipment and things like that. There's a range of kind of prices and options for that, but that is, I would say, much like any work environment, people were living and working from home, and that is still very much the case today. So, and as Devin said, we're just getting back to in person this week. If you had specific questions about how the audition process works, I just think it's very different from being in a room with somebody. You don't have that kind of live exchange, but so it's a different kind of animal, and a lot of it is like auditioning for film and television, even though it might be a theater audition. But sorry, it's okay. But yeah, I would say everything has transitioned to virtual and continues to be so until we see what happens. So it's great that live theater is back, and it's happening, but we haven't quite fully reintegrated into live and in person as far as auditions go yet.
The acting company is about to go into a full audition process. We're doing the first rounds virtual. The second round is sort of live via sort of Zoom or a format like that. And in the very final round, we are calling people in person, just for the final sort of double check. And as frustrating as some of the virtual elements are, we have also seen that they've expanded a degree of access. We do first round general auditions, and we often only have time to see 3 days worth of people, so 300, maybe a little bit more than that. In our last round, we got about 1,200 submissions that we watched in order to sort of winnow down to the people that we were more interested in casting for a specific project. So there is some ability to actually allow the virtual to expand who has access, although as Greg pointed out, the monetary cost of self-taping is not insignificant.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit? I'm just curious, and I don't know, it might be helpful for the audience too. But again, as a director, is there anything in particular that you all are looking for in terms of like the Zoom audition or the self-tape audition rather than being in person?
Um, I mean, most of it is this so very similar to what the in person are. We mostly want to see someone's personality and their take on on a specific piece of text. For the Zoom ones, personally, I prefer them as simple as possible. I'd like to see enough of a body that I can see whether or not language is grounded in. We do a lot of classical work and Shakespeare, so it's a lot of heightened language, and it is important to me to see whether that is just sort of head up or whether it's sort of grounded into a body. Um, but beyond that, the fancier people are with those things, the often the more I'm sort of turned off. It starts distracting rather than letting me see something as simple as a human body and a human voice, which is what I'm generally most interested in, at least in an audition process.
Awesome. Thank you both. That actually kind of segues nicely into my next question about how do you think things have sort of like evolved, over the crazy like past 2 years, like what do you think is different between like now and, pre-pandemic, like what has sort of changed the most? I mean, I guess you sort of answered with like the self-tape question, I guess, but if you guys have any other further insights into like sort of how that's changed. I mean, I know for stage managers, I feel like things are, things were just all virtual. Alyssa and Jeff last week talked a lot about how like they were stage managing virtual readings for a long time. And all of a sudden Jeff was like, became like a head of a stage management like department at a college just because he was like, yeah, this is where the jobs are. And he's like, this isn't what I thought I'd be doing, but that's what I need to make money to like live in New York City. And so if you guys could touch on that, that would be great.
I think Devin mentioned, it's interesting like how access expanded because of Zoom. Again, geographical barriers were removed. So people could, like virtual work. People could be anywhere and present, or share their work or present an opportunity. Which is really cool. I think it's unfortunately, I think it's something that people aren't really interested in retaining. As we get back into in-person work, and there's this I don't know if there's a debate between live and in person. I know there was a lot, but I think it's I wasn't really necessarily interested in that debate whether it's theater or not. I think again we're all trying to continue to work and create give opportunity and employment for people throughout the last 2 years, and the industry was really decimated, unfortunately. I think how do we tell stories, and what's the medium that we're working in? The theaters off. Shakespeare refers to the stage as a wooden O. And we've got these square boxes on Zoom, right? So, and I think there are people doing really interesting work in sort of both mediums, and people had to adapt and adjust, right? And again, from an audience perspective, again, it didn't matter if you were in New York City or in Calcutta or wherever. I mean, you could if you could click on a link and you had the internet, you could zoom in and see theater from all across the country, all across the world, which is really interesting and exciting. And again, that's not only for general audiences, but people who maybe can't get to the theater, or don't necessarily have access, could see it, which I thought was really, really cool. So that kind of evolving conversation, obviously it's something that I pay attention to, and I'm trying to get the field to pay attention to a little more. But I think that was really exciting in a sense. And I think is there a way to kind of retain? I think what we learned, and what we're not just in theater and the arts, but in every sector, I think the door has now been open in terms of people can work virtually and still be as productive. Work can be presented virtually and it can still have artistic merit. You can still tell a good story. And so I think if there's any sort of hybrid form, those are potentially really, really exciting, and we'll see where we go. I think theater is always it's what's great about theater is that is live and in person. It is an art of flesh and blood. So the fact that you're in the same space, breathing the same air, having a shared communal experience is important. But again, out of necessity, what people had to do, I think, was really exciting, and I'm interested to see how that will remain or not remain as we get back to normal, as it were.
And there are a number of theaters that are talking about maintaining a sort of live stream of their productions for the foreseeable future. I know at least 3 artistic directors who are running with the idea that every show will be accessible through virtual formats as well as in-person formats moving forward. And I've had amazing luck with sort of development processes, maintaining virtual like elements so that you just have access to people at a wider range. You aren't limited to only the people in your city to be working with, which has been really, we've had a bunch of international playwrights that we've been able to work with in a way that we wouldn't have been able to a couple of years ago. Quite exciting. I also feel like one of the things that changed or is in the process of changing is that the sort of conversation about, well, work-life balance for theater artists has evolved. Theater has always been an art, I think most art forms, but theater has always been a place where people have been pushed really far in terms of how much work you have to do in order to even come close to scraping a living together, what you're sort of willing to do for how little money. It's often quite brutal and self-selecting and drives a lot of people and a lot of amazing talents sort of away from the industry. And that's just been more forefronted in the conversation after we saw an entire industry get decimated and everyone who had been freelancing suddenly realized exactly how little of a support system the industry was offering them and how much trouble that was. There have been a lot of conversations about how to change that, how to shift the hours we work, what we ask of artists, what we pay artists to sort of do the work. I don't think solutions have been found by any stretch of the imagination, but at least the conversation is a little more forward. I know within my company, we've changed a number of rules and are looking at other rules that we can change and other sort of basic processes that we have used and how we can, in some cases, sort of burn them to the ground and sort of start over. Some of those things are going to take more time than I wish they would, but we're at least talking about it in a way that we absolutely were not when I first started with the company. The horror stories of what tour life is like sometimes are hilarious as anecdotes and pretty unpleasant in their sort of reality. So I'm glad we can start making some of those changes now.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of change happening. I mean, not to say that like things wouldn't have necessarily changed, you know, if the pandemic hadn't happened, but yeah, those conversations have definitely been a lot more at the forefront, especially, I mean, an example is like getting rid of the 10 out of 12 day, which like I am like a huge fan of getting rid of that because it's like so exhausting and like the amount of work that actually gets done is not necessarily the best work that can be done. So, I mean, for people who don't know, a 10 out of 12 is like a really long rehearsal day. Usually it's a technical rehearsal with all the tech elements and all the designers and actors, and, you know, everybody in the same room together, like for the first time. And it's just like a really, really long rehearsal. And there's usually at least like 2 or 3 of them, if not more. Sometimes on Broadway, that's like all you do for weeks and it's exhausting. And people have been talking about, you know, getting rid of it because it's just not worth, you know, the mental strain, emotional strain on your life, on your family life, you know, whatever. So things like that, you know, just having those conversations. And I also wanted to bring up the idea of like diversity, equity, and inclusion as well has been sort of been coming out into the forefront as well because of this pandemic, which is great. You know, it's more of like, what are we doing to like, you know, actors, like, you know, other careers in theater too, like, you know, people of color, like, how do we treat them? Like, what are those conversations looking like? I mean, as a, you know, as a woman of color who, you know, went to a very, you know, very white institution like Yale, you know, it's like, what does that mean for the future? You know, what does that mean? You know, what did that mean in my career? Like things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. All right, another question to ask. This is the one I like to sort of leave on because I just want to make sure we leave enough time for like questions from the audience. But what do you both love about working in the theater as professionals?
Sure. Do you know, theater people are some of the most exciting, intelligent, smart, witty, fun people I've ever had the pleasure to meet. Right, it's a truly collaborative art form. So much has to happen in order for a work of theater to come together, right? In the traditional sense. As an actor, I often think musicians can practice every day. Dancers go to the bar and do their exercises every day. Sculptors and painters can paint every day, right? But as an actor, you need so many other things, in order to practice your craft, right, and engage in it. And I just think there's a and I'm just constantly reminded, being an actor, actors get a lot of the focus, right, because they're forward facing in front of the public. But the amount of people, right, from on the artistic side, the design side, the administrative side, that goes into what makes a play and a piece of theater or an entire season is really astounding, and awesome in the truest sense of the word. So I think like being tapped into that it is really exciting. And like anything else, sometimes a job is just a job, but sometimes you're really fortunate to be involved in a project or with a group of people where you feel you're really doing something exciting, worthwhile, that can be affecting change, right, within the industry, whether it be in terms of representation or the story that's never been told before, or told in quite a way that it's been told, right? And I think Nicole mentioned, DEI is the acronym for like diversity, equity, inclusion, right? But again, theater is should be, Shakespeare says it's, hold the mirror up to nature, right? But I think theater, beyond just being a mirror, is also can be a door, right? Because on stage you can see every experience like known to humankind, right? And you can be exposed to an experience that you may not have access to in your own life. And again, you're sharing that with other people in real time, in a shared space, in a communal environment. So I think it's a really powerful art form in that sense, which can be, it's not the easiest life choice or vocation, right? And it's not a meritocracy, but I think it can be a really exciting, worthwhile endeavor when it is really firing on all cylinders. I'm done. Thanks.
Mostly, I would just second everything Greg just said. That is a sort of beautiful summation of what it is to sort of work in the theater and why this art form has always felt special to me. The other thing, and it's related to the sort of communal aspect, one of the things that drew me to the theater is that it is a sort of fusion of so many other forms of art, that it involves narrative and writing and poetry. It involves acting and sort of sculpting in time. There is painting involved, and sort of everything that humans make with the hope of creating something beautiful or tragic, to tell a story and change the world. It all sort of meets in the theater, and you can draw from all of those things when you're trying to sort of create something new. A lot of my work is based in sort of so-called classics of the Western canon, Shakespeare, the Greeks. But a lot of what we do at my company and in my own work is find the ways to sort of connect those pieces to today, to sort of break them and realign them and sort of create that ability for us to connect today with yesterday and see how it's different and how it's the same, and try to use that both to entertain and, as Greg pointed out, to change the world. One of the things I've always loved about Shakespeare is that he believes that to speak aloud is to change the world, that to utter something into existence has ultimate possibility. And I love being able to walk into a room with 20 people who all also believe that and try to make something. So that's generally what keeps me coming back.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I love about theater. I mean, I love everything about it. I mean, yeah, it's the ability to be in the same room and like have totally different experiences. I think sometimes where it's like I could love a show and the next person next to me is like, I did not understand anything that just happened, but that's just me. Can you both talk a little bit about what you're both working on right now?
The acting company is about to go into design and auditions for our upcoming national tour. We have two plays, a new version of Romeo and Juliet, cut and adapted by Leah C. Gardner, and a new version of The Three Musketeers, adapted by Kirsten Childs, with a focus on the fact that Alexander Dumas was in fact Black, and that story sprang from a Black imagination, which is something that I would say 95% of the adaptations ignore. And she's created this really exciting, sexy, muscular, completely contemporary adaptation of this story. There's going to be capoeira and like fencing. She mixes lines from Dumas, Shakespeare, and Ludacris in the same passage in a way that I find pretty endlessly inventive and entertaining. So I'm super excited about that tour. And I'm also working on a sea shanty opera based on Arctic exploration, which is mostly just weird and fun, but I'm enjoying it.
Everybody loves a sea shanty opera. That's cool. That's awesome. I have some really acting projects that I'm excited about coming up that I can't necessarily divulge right now just because they're not public, but that's really exciting. But at Queen's Theatre, we're in the process of planning and launching a national festival to highlight and serve as a platform for the work of deaf and disabled artists across the country. So that'll be in May of this year, which is really exciting. A lot of moving parts, a lot of logistical issues, but that's really cool and that's really exciting. So it'll be theater, dance, music, solo performance, storytelling, all kinds of stuff, run the gamut. So that's really cool. And that seems like enough. Like that's plenty, for the moment. But that's really exciting, and that's keeping me busy.
Awesome. I mean, I see we have Joan has a question. She wanted to know where Romeo and Juliet and the Three Musketeers are going on tour first. Do you have a tour schedule out yet, Devin, or no?
We don't have the full tour schedule out. We're actually teching the shows at Queen's Theatre.
Oh, get out.
And then they will play in New York at the New Victory on 42nd. And then the national tour goes all over. There are New Jersey, Maine, Vermont, I don't know. We're hitting like 40 states, I think. So it should be a while.
That's awesome. Greg, I forgot to mention, I have also worked at Queen's Theatre, like way back in the day, like right when I got out of college. And I was like, oh, I've worked there. I've done 2 shows there in like the Black Box Theater, though, not at the main stage, a long time ago. Can you guys talk about who are some of your favorite contemporary playwrights?
I think Celine's Song is pretty remarkable. Marcus Gardley, Jen Silverman are all playwrights that I really love, that are working right now. Terrell McCraney. Yeah. I could probably go on.
Yeah, I go too, but I think somebody wanted to ask a question. I saw. If you want to take that, Nicole.
Yeah, Joan, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Devin. Hi, Greg. I'm on here on behalf of my daughter who's in 9th grade. She just finished, I told Nicole last time, Newsies, and actually they're going to see Romeo and Juliet. She's just in high school, but she loves the theater. Like she's found out that that's her thing too. And I wanted to see how about I could help her, because I see how you guys, you're like you had mentioned, you're your career path took so many different directions. Like I think Devin was first even saying about writing and being a sculptor, and then went back to school to grad school at Yale, now for director and all. Just as a mother of a freshman who's just newly experiencing the theater as an actor, and then backstage she did some like crew. What would you suggest I could do to help her, or what things that she could do to help herself?
I would say the best thing you can do as a parent, if she's expressing interest in this field, is support her. Whatever way you can. It sounds like you are, which is really fantastic. And again, at this point, if she's only a freshman, and is her interest relatively new to theater?
She's been doing it. I guess she started doing it. No, she's been doing it since like 7 or 8 years old. But now it's just the love for it has really flourished, and we had a lot of great opportunities also through the pandemic with some of Zoom things with different actors that put together some things like classes or whatever, master classes. So that was a good thing. But yeah, she likes being on stage, but at the same time, then she did backstage help, and she really wants to learn about directing, and she just trying to figure out her place.
Again, there's so many different jobs and facets of theater, what makes theater. So the fact that she's interested in that and already has that kind of inborn in her, that desire or that will to learn and be curious about the form overall, I think the more you can just encourage that and say, what about this or this or this, sounds like she's right where she needs to be, and you as a parent are there too. Because I think even if she's just if she's on the technical side for one production and then acting in the other one, she's going to learn all kinds of different things. And the more, again, I think with theater, you try and create the best. I do anyway, trying to create a sense of ensemble, right? So and every piece of that ensemble is important and needs to be respected, right, and appreciated. So the more that she has actual understanding of that and actually the experience of that, I think will go a long way towards not only her overall enjoyment of that, but a lifelong appreciation and understanding of what it takes to make what happens on stage happen. So I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. One thing, how would you get into an internship or something at that age?
I mean, I think it's partially, you guys can answer, as well, but I think it's just looking at playbill.com a lot of the time, because they have a lot of job listings, a lot of internships. And I know, for different companies, they have different requirements, how old you can be or whatever. But I mean, even just volunteering, I know when I was in high school, I was just volunteering wherever I could, and then sort of sometimes lying about how old I was, which was not great, but just get that experience. I assisted directed on a show when I probably shouldn't have. I think I was 16 at the time, but yeah, it's those kinds of things, just getting as much experience. I know when I was in high school, I was only acting really, and I'm not an actor by any stretch of the imagination, but that's the only experience I was getting, so that's all I knew that there was really. So, but Greg and Devin can probably answer that better.
A lot of theaters are re-examining how internships and fellowships and things like that work. A lot of them have sort of taken them apart because a number of them were not the best educational experiences, and we're often sort of using young artists as labor. So a lot of programs, especially in the face of the pandemic, have been sort of tamped down. I would say as useful as an internship, especially for someone at her age, looking at just other opportunities to put shows together through schools or other groups. There are definitely theaters that have sort of youth ensembles where they actually make shows as a group. I personally found that was one of my best routes to theater. I think as similar to what sort of Greg pointed out, the idea of getting the chance to do all the different things that it takes to put up a show is really essential. I think the more artists are sort of explore the full breadth of the world around them, the deeper their sort of work can be. so seeing different types of theater, if she's working on Newsies, that's great. Going to see Romeo and Juliet is awesome. I found that going to theater also sort of expanded my range, and going to theater that was not always the most immediate sort of choices. Schools will take kids to Shakespeare and musicals, but there's a lot of other work going on that can be incredibly instructive and often more reflective of the world we live in now. I know that seeing some of those pieces is what sort of finally kicked me over into really seeing this as a career. Was it because I saw work that I was like, oh yes, that's something I would make. That's something I want to be involved in. That's not just tights and swords. Although I like tights and swords as well, so can't go wrong.
And I would think, I would just say too, if in this endeavor and in this journey, if your daughter sees the work of a company or an organization that she's really into, there's nothing wrong with her writing to somebody within that organization and saying, I really was moved by this work, I really appreciated this work. Can I get in touch with the director, or is there a way I can work with you? I really like what you guys are doing. Never be afraid to ask, because the worst anybody can do is say no. So I would just encourage that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thanks for coming back 2 weeks in a row. We're so happy to have you. I'm so happy to have you. I am going to try to wrap this up because it is almost 5 o'clock, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to Devin and Greg. You guys are amazing. I miss working with both of you. I'll probably go back into the theater soon if this librarian thing doesn't work out in the long run. But who knows? I don't know. But thank you guys so much. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in touch with Greg and Devin. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And I hope everybody has an amazing weekend. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Nicole.
Bye.
Thank you, Nicole. Have a good day.
Bye.